Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Living Corner. I am Jackie, and it's almost Halloween. Halloween is tomorrow as I'm filming this. I apologize. I'm still sick. My voice sounds terrible, and I'm still congested. I think my theory is that because I didn't take any medicine before my allergy appointment, because I had to get allergy testing, and and if I took an antihistamine, that would defeat the purpose of taking the allergy testing. So, I couldn't take anything, so I blame that for me not being able to. But we had to do it. I had to take the test, get the allergy testing, so, but I think that's the only thing I can come up with why I'm still sick, because my colds don't usually last that long. Unless it's more than just a cold, which that could be the case. And we did test to see if I had COVID. We did twice, and I'm fine. I got negative for both times. I have this nasty cough and I'm congested and stuff, so. But I wanted to film this one in the end of the year book tag. But I don't know. I might refilm that anyway. Because I don't know if I like that video. But I'm going to see how well I do with this video. Hopefully this one will be good. Because, well, this is my wrap up. And I want my wrap up to be good. And I don't want to wait too long before I film my wrap up. Because I don't know if I'll get any other books in. I mean, I will show you the books I'm currently reading that still one of them is still horror related. But I don't know if I'll finish it before the end of the month, because we only have 2 days left, and I'm not gonna get any reading done within 2 days. Not only am I sick, but also I don't read the whole day. And not just take breaks from meals or bathroom breaks. I mean, like, I like to get on the computer and do stuff like this. So, and then my mom and I are gonna, when she gets back from running from Aldi's and does her walk for the day, then we'll carve the pumpkin. But I wanted to film these first before I sat, because she was like telling me, she feels like I should get some fresh air, because I've been inside all day. Yesterday, and I was supposed to go to work today, but then I called out last night because I was just, my parents and I both agreed that I was just feeling really crappy, and it's not like tomorrow I was going to get any better, because my first thought was, if I don't have a fever and I'm not like sick as in I feel like I'm going to be sick, which ironic because last night I did, and thinking I was going to be sick because my cough was relentless. But nothing happened, so, I'm, like, thinking, do I call out? Because I don't have any of those things. But then I'm hacking up, I'm coughing a lot, and I'm terribly congested, and I can't sleep, and my voice sounds scratchy, so it was like, my mom was like, just call them, and so I did, and my manager was cool with it. So I'm not working today, and I'll still have to call them back to see if I'm working on Wednesday, though, because I don't remember, and the schedule won't show up until Tuesday, or around midnight going into Wednesday. So I'll have to check and see if I'm working on Wednesday, and I need to know before on Tuesday, because I feel like my parents do, because they bring me to work. So anyway, it's time for the wrap up. So I read a lot more in September than October. And I think the lesson here is short stories and audiobooks are a good idea to read, to add to your reading, because then it will look like you got a lot read. Even though that shouldn't be that's not the most important, but it'll be kind of, it's my pride, because it's kind of nice to see when I read a lot in the month. But, even if you don't read a lot, as long as you read good quality books that you're content, happy with, and enjoy, and are meaningful to you, then that's all that matters. So I do know that, I make jokes all I want, sometimes get ones, and feel a little bit of pride when I read a lot in the month, but, get a lot read in the month, but, I do know that's not the most important thing. Quality is the most important thing. So, don't judge me too harshly for comments like what I just said. Okay, so let's talk about my September reading. So a lot of my books I don't have a physical copy to show you, and as I always say, I don't know how to show the image on the screen. So, okay, like the first book, The Orchard, by Kristen Gorcheva Newberry. This was actually, I got this because I borrowed this from the library because Olive from Book Olive talked about it. It's a retelling of what is his name? One of the famous Russian short story authors. See how sick I am as I can't remember these details. Well, it's a famous short story, The Cherry Orchard. Okay, at least I remember that, The Cherry Orchard, and this is a retelling of it. It's set in the 1980s, so it was during when Russia was called the Soviet Union. It was before the little countries within Russia got separated into their own individual places. And they were kind of transitioning between various leaders because, some of them would get assassinated. They were in a really terrible place at the time in history. And you had our four main characters, these teenagers who are just trying to get by in the world and survive and grow up in this world, this this country of theirs, and it's basically a coming of age story, and they go through having relationships and like romantic, getting their first significant other and their friendship. Our main character has her best friend, and just trying to get by in this world, and not really understanding, but knowing that their lives are very complicated, and and of course they're limited on their knowledge, what they know about the outside world. I mean, they think they're brainwashed into thinking that their society is better compared to ours. Like they would rather have what they have there than what we have, because they're told things that are completely different than how it really is here. Because compared to that, we're pretty better. We're pretty free and better off. At least compared to how Russia was, and how it still is today. And our main character does eventually end up going to Russia. Coming to the U.S. She is in Russia, coming to the U.S. And it's just, and they do read the play at one point, in school. Unfortunately, I don't remember the book that well, so, and also, my brain's not functioning right now, so I just, like I said, I just wanted to get this wrap up in before the end of the month. And I just remember it being it's a good book, it's very bittersweet, and if, unlike me, you do cry during books, I think you will cry in this book, because I'm just not a crier with books. I get more emotional when I get the visuals of, like, a movie or a TV show. It's just a very dark, intense story, and a very bitter story, These characters, these young kids are very cynical at an early age, which is really sad. And it's just a very political driven story. And I think if you are a fan of Russian history, you might like this book. I don't know, but I would think you would. Anyway, so it was good. It was very intense though. Okay, so next is one that I could actually show you. I read another story from this collection, Skeleton Crew, and I read The Raft. About, and let's see how well I remember this. So it's a group of friends. I don't remember their names. These two guys and their girlfriends, and one of them jokingly says, "We should swim out in the lake, in this big lake." And it's October at the time, so it's really cold there. And they're in Maine, so their October's actually kind of cold. And so his friend is like, "Oh, okay, let's do it." And of course, our narrator was like, "I wasn't being serious." But he wants to impress the girls, but then won't impress the girls. And he also sees his girlfriend looking at his friend. And he's kind of pissed off about that. And he wants to get her attention back to him, because she's his girlfriend. So, the guy, his friend, swims out there in that lake, and so our main character's like, oh, well, I better do this too. And he swims out there, and then the two girls swim out, and our narrator, when they're out there, they get to the raft, and he notices some black spot in the water, a big perfect circle in the water, and he starts getting nervous about it. He doesn't know what it is, and his friends are dismissing it as a just as a, probably like smut, like, I can't remember what they referred to it as, but they basically dismissed it, and then but our main character notices it is getting a little too close for them. It's getting a little too close. And I really like this compared to the ones I've read so far. It was really creepy. And I like how it was one of those situations where it's a group of friends that there's a little bit of tension between them. Like, I think it's kind of entertaining whenever a group of characters are thrown together in a scary situation, but there's tension between them. They don't like each other. So combine that with the fear of what's going on, and whenever a scary thing is happening, I think it adds to the drama and the tension of the horror of the story. And I did get very frustrated with his friend and his girlfriend, who were eyeing each other, giving each other the. And what's funny is that he was like, okay, well, I'm gonna steal your girlfriend. So he kind of focuses her attention on her because she's absolutely terrified of what's going on, because she's starting to agree with our narrator. She's starting to notice it too. It's really creepy, and it kind of makes me think of The Blob a little bit. I've never actually seen the movie The Blob. It kind of reminds me of that. I'm starting to like that sci-fi horror genre. As long as it's easy to understand, doesn't focus too much on the science. Which actually the other library book, One Moves the Dead, has a science fiction feel to it too, science fiction horror feel. I mean, it does get more into the actual, it does focus more on the science in that one, and this one is more something monstrous, but it does feel science fiction-y a little bit, because it feels like it's like the way they think this thing in the water is like a chemical or something, a chemical spill. I think that's what they. Great, here we go. Here we go. Sorry, that's what I've been doing on and off all this week, and then like I said, it gets worse at night. But it was really cool, really creepy. So far, that's probably my favorite one. Although I did really love The Mist, and I want to see that. And The Jot was a really cool story too, and I liked the monkey. So I have. So the next one I'll probably read. The next one I'll read is The Word Processor of Gods, and The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands, and The Beach World. And there's a story called Fort Owen. So I'm wondering if that's a horror story he wrote for his son. Because it's his son's name, Owen. But, yep, so there's that one. I feel like with short story collections, you can take your time with it and not read it all all of them at once. But I do like to read at least a few of them. When I first started reading, at least a few of them, getting a few of them done. Okay, so next again is a library book, Mary Jane. Which that one, my library ordered that for me and got that for me, because I had thought I'd seen it there once before, and luckily it was Melissa that was there, because I have a bit of a relationship with her, so we are kind of able to share books and stuff. I even got her to read Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is the new trilogy in the world of Caraval, and she really loved it. And she loved this one too. I got her to read this one too. This was a recommendation from Olive, from Book Olive. I saw her review and I got really intrigued by it, so I kept keeping an eye out for it at bookstores and at the library. And when I mentioned to Melissa, she's like, "Oh, we can order it for you." So she ordered it for me. And this was a book set in the 1970s, so it's actually my parents' childhood, the decades my parents grew up in. And our main character, Mary Jane, she's the daughter of a very conservative religious family. Um, and they have her parents. There's not a lot of love and affection in there. And as Olive put it from her in her review, and I'm trying to remember to add stuff that I didn't add in my review, where I did a separate review of this book. And there was stuff in there that I thought about after reminding myself of Olive's review that I should have included. That her relationship was, there's not a lot of affection in her family. They're very formal. They go to church. Like I said, they're super conservative and religious. And as Olive put it, there's a staleness in their household, and their bond is these three people. It's just three people that happen to have the roles of mother, father, daughter. And she ends up getting and she's only 14, and she gets a summer job because she doesn't want to go away to camp with her friends, but as a nanny to a little girl. Her dad is a psychiatrist, I think, and her mom's I don't know if the mom, I can't remember if the mom had a job. I think she was originally a stay-at-home mom, I think. But they're having trouble taking care of their daughter, so they asked me. So Mary Jane becomes her nanny. And it turns out that the dad has a patient coming to stay and live with them also for the summer, this famous rock star who has drug addiction issues. And his girlfriend, I think it's his girlfriend, I don't know if it's his wife or his girlfriend. And this experience really changes Mary Jane, because she, she's very influenced by her parents, but all of a sudden she sees this new lifestyle and these new people that behave differently and are a little more loose and fancy free and doing some questionable things, but they're also at the same time very happy. They're happier at times. Well, although that's debatable. Actually, I wouldn't say they're happier, but they're a little more content than her parents. There's a more relaxed feeling and affectionate feeling in this household. And it changes Mary Jane's life. She realizes there's an alternative lifestyle she can live if she wants to. And she has a choice. But she kind of at first feels guilty about it because she knows her parents would approve of it. But the more she spends time with these people, and the more the affection she feels for them, the more it becomes easy for her to lie to her parents because she knows they wouldn't approve of her living there. And at one point she has to tell her mom that the little girl's mom has cancer because her mom doesn't understand why the mom doesn't cook the meals, and that Mary Jane has been made responsible for that. And she doesn't, and so the only thing that Mary Jane can come up with is this lie to her mom that the mom has cancer. So because her mom wouldn't approve of her taking care of the household, doing chores and cooking meals and stuff. So it's really intriguing story. There's sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the story, because our main character is a rock star, and it's a very adult book. But it's interesting to see Mary Jane's journey of self-discovery and experiencing all this in such an innocent way. And a rock star guy he's a drug addiction, but he's a very laid back, very nice guy, except for he cheats on his girlfriend. It's just a really cool, fun read. And I think Olive from Book Olive her review is better than mine. But if you want to check it out, I did do a review for this book. But also I would check out Olive from Book Olive's review as well, because like I said, her review is more succinct. I think I'm really bad at reviews, in all honesty. I mean, I try, and I'm gonna keep doing reviews, but individual reviews of some books, but I don't think I'm the best at reviewing them. Okay, so next, after that one, in which I kind of started this one in August. Sorry, I had to look. I mean, I know my months, but I had to still look and see what comes before September. I started this next one in August. The audiobook of the Alexander Hamilton biography by Ron Chernow. I saw the musical. I really loved it. So I decided I wanted to read the biography, but it's a chunky book. It's a long one. And with nonfiction, I'm still kind of progressing my way to get into it. Like, I might participate in nonfiction November, or at least, like, I just want to at least start making more progress on my Walt Disney biography. But reading the audiobook really helped me get through it. And it was one that I started during the summer, I think in August. And it might have started in July, I don't remember, because it's a long one. And I feel like because it's a musical, it's a stage show in a musical, the Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did the musical, barely covered the surface of Ron Chernow's the biography. Like, I think there's so much more, and he had to pick, and I imagine that Lin-Manuel Miranda, sorry, I can still not say his name, had to pick and choose what to focus on in the musical, because he's only got, I think it's 2 hours, maybe 3. These are the same length as a movie. But it's a stage play, so he's limited to what he can do. And, he also has the songs to cover also, and sometimes the songs cover the little details that aren't acted out in the scenes, like included via dialogue and stuff. So, the biography has so much more, expands on a lot of things that the musical barely touched on. And it's interesting, he focuses more on Hamilton's relationship with, what is that guy's name? With, Aaron Burr, who was the one that actually shot Hamilton and killed him. He was kind of his rival. But really, in the biography, you realize that Jefferson and Madison are more important to Hamilton than Aaron Burr. There was more tension with them because he spent most of his time with them. Which, yeah, the musical does point out that his relationship with Aaron Burr is on and off, like they cross paths every so often. And he was involved in the downfall of Alexander Hamilton, and of course he eventually kills him. But and all the stuff he included is true, but it's just he did have to tweak some things, I think, when he made that musical, and not include everything. But it's interesting reading about how it was like Jefferson and Hamilton kind of started this whole, like, how campaigns work today, how the rivalry between two candidates, and like the two biased newspapers, and how each newspaper is biased to one side of one party, and Hamilton wasn't even running. He was just kind of, they saw him as the puppet master. Like, he was the father of government. He kind of had Washington in his pocket, as the song puts it. He and Washington were very close. And Washington never felt like he was being controlled by Hamilton. He made his own decisions, but he often agreed with Hamilton's decisions too, oftentimes. So it always looked like that Hamilton was kind of controlling him and manipulating him. And Jefferson is just not, like, Hamilton seems to bring out the worst in people, I think, including Adams. That's part of, Adams was very stubborn, and I don't even think I think he wanted Um, like, I think he preferred the quiet life. He wanted to take responsibility for, protecting the people, but I don't think he liked sitting in the power chair, the president's chair. I don't think he entirely liked, being in charge. Although no, Washington hated him more, I think, than Adams did. Um, Adams preferred his own quiet life on his farm with his wife and kids. And he didn't trust people. He didn't trust his cabinet, which it's kind of funny though because he kept them there. He didn't trust them, but he didn't get rid of them either. And he did not realize, he didn't really realize that some of them were still friends of Hamilton's anyway. So, he didn't let Hamilton have a role and have back his secretary of Treasury job, because he didn't want Hamilton whispering in his ear, trying to influence him, like supposedly he did with Washington. But at the same time, he was kind of able to plant his seeds and put his ideas out there. But yeah, he brings out the worst in Jefferson, Madison, and Adams. The only person whose worst side we don't see is Washington, but that's because him and Washington are very similar in their way of thinking. The Mariah Reynolds thing lasted a lot longer than I thought. It was a long time before anyone found out, before it became public, before his wife found out. And it definitely was, her response was one of these things where she was not happy about it, but she still stayed loyal to him. For, because I think she still loved him, and also for image. But yeah, there's so much more in this book, and I think if you love the musical, you should at least attempt to read the book. It is a long, chunky book. It's a huge book, and I recommend, if you can't read books that long, you can't physically read them, check out the audiobook. The audiobook really helps. But yeah, so there was that, and I did buy that one. I do, but I don't have a physical copy. I have the audiobook copy, so I can't show you unless I show you my phone. Okay, and then next is another library book, Piranesi, by Susanna Clarke. So my original plan was, I was trying to get Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell done first before I jump into Piranesi, but that was not going to happen. So finally, I saw Piranesi at the library, and I borrowed it, and I liked it. It's basically this guy who, our narrator, is in this mysterious labyrinth-like house with all these mysterious rooms that, have oceans and animals and all these different scenes and stuff like that. And then he also, this other guy who lives with, he calls the Other, he's a scientist, and he's kind of studying and observing these things, and our main character is his assistant and will do things for him. But then one day, he is warned that there's someone else who shows up in this place, and he knows the other guy, and they talk for, our narrator and this guy talk, this new person talk for a little bit, and he also, right after he's warned by the Other that there's a threat that is trying to get into this place and to stay away from them. And the new arrival that our main character talked to, he suspects, what if he is this other person that I was warned about? And I think that's it. It's been a while. And that's the only problem with doing bi-monthly, is I might not remember all that I've read the previous month. But anyway, this was really entertaining. I don't know if there's any Greek myths I should have read beforehand, but I still really enjoyed this. I liked our main character and his happy-go-lucky, optimistic, hopeful attitude, and he's always so curious and very loyal, and he's just very content with where he lives. This is his world. This is the world to him. He doesn't realize there's an outside world, and he's cool with this. He is content with this. And he does get a little suspicious of the other, and the other is not that nice. The other is actually not that nice of a guy. He's kind of a bully to our main character. He doesn't really care about his feelings and stuff like that. And once you find out what's actually going on, that makes sense why he doesn't. Like, it's because there's a reason he doesn't care. And I also think the world is so creepy but cool at the same time. This big place, like I picture it as this house that kind of like, you know how in Doctor Who the TARDIS is bigger on the inside. I picture it like that, where it's this big house, but it's even bigger on the inside because there's whole worlds in there. But it's also creepy because it's isolated, and I feel like it's this very dark, limited light. And that's what I was picturing, a very kind of dark place, a dark house with very limited light. And then you go into the rooms and you maybe see something that seems similar to the outside world, but it's not. It's just the whole concept of this other place is, like I said, a mixture of cool and creepy. The idea is really fascinating to explore. And it's a short book, so I was able to get through it quickly. And I do like the other characters that come in and out. They're cool too. Very interesting. The other is really intriguing. I guess I didn't trust him either. I didn't know if he was going to turn out to be a bad guy or a good guy. And it was a really, really entertaining, compelling read. So there is that one, Piranesi. This is a little bit closer to me, so I won't be starting so far. Okay, so next is, I decided to go and read some Lovecraft. I know that people have issues with Lovecraft, but I wanted to start from the beginning and read an older science fiction horror author. And I do want to read Lovecraft. I do at some point want to read Lovecraft Country. And then there's another book that's a retelling of Lovecraft short stories that I want to read as well. I cannot think of what it's called. I can pick. I can't think of it, but it's a retelling of one of his works. But I think his short stories are very creepy and interesting. But yeah, I acknowledge that he is very racist. And there's one story that clearly has some racism issues. Or like questionable stuff in there. But I still, like I said, I'm still curious about his work and I still want to read it. I still think it's good. But I read, okay, so the first one I read from this collection is, I remember it from the audiobook of 7 short stories by H.P. Lovecraft. That audiobook I listened to where the narrator bored me to tears. And that is, I think, Dagon. And this is the cover, and this is really cool. I like this cover, and it does have the deckled edges. It's a kind of a deluxe edition. Yeah, it is. It's a deluxe edition. And it doesn't have all of his works. I do have a hardback bind of all his works. But I remember this one a little bit. Like, this guy he escapes this German prison war boat. It's a prison. People are captured and imprisoned, and he escapes out into the water, starts sailing away. But then he ends up finding himself on a beach that's where there's all these dead fish, and it's completely isolated, and this is kind of mucky and icky on this place. Um, and it's isolated. It's just this empty beach with all the dead fish. And he sees something that gives him nightmares. So it's hard to figure out how much to tell with this kind of with short stories. But yeah, I remember thinking I thought it was pretty good. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. And I definitely liked it a little bit more now that I personally read it myself. But yeah, it was very creepy and it was more science fiction-y. It really plays on the fear of isolation and being alone, and which I think is terrifying because we're, as humans, we're social creatures. Or how even those scientist types, they're antisocial, or people, even they still need some companionship. And dang it, my mom's home. I should have been sitting outside getting some fresh air. But like I said, I wanted to film these videos. So yeah, it was good. The next one from this collection I read was The Statement of Randolph Carter. Let's see if I can and this one, let me Oh crap. I'm sorry. Not that matters because you probably could barely see it, but I just realized I think I might have. Did I show you the one I showed you on the screen? The title I showed you, I think, might have been the one I had bookmarked, which is the picture in the house. So that I didn't. It was not that one, obviously. I don't remember if I showed you the right image, but I mean, maybe I opened to it just now and I did show you the right one. But let me look at it for a second to see if I remember. Okay, I think this is the one where these guys, this guy he's been called in by the police. I don't know if it's Scotland, and he's talking about how him and his friends, they went to a grave and witnessed someone coming, something in the shadows, from something dead in the shadows, possibly taking their friend. So that was pretty creepy. I like the atmosphere of the graveyard. I always love the atmosphere of a graveyard. I think it adds to the creep factor. And I kind of like how this is the second story in this collection that starts with someone where they end up in the place where they end up at the end of their experience, and he's telling the story. He's explaining what happened that led to where he is now, why he's so terrified. I really like that. I like that because when you start reading, you're like, okay, what happened? How did this guy end up here? How did the guy end up in this place? And seeing, like, I kind of like when you, on like a movie or show, you get the narrator, and you see it like played out, and you're just curious how things ended the way they are, and you think things are going to turn out a certain way, but then as you read it, you realize things are not going to be exactly what you expected to be. And that was one of those kinds of stories. And then I'm just going to hold it like this down. Okay, and then the next one after that, Facts Concerning of Arthur Germain and His Family. This is the one that might be questionable for racism, because the way he describes the characters and stuff. And I already thought this one was interesting, but I didn't love it. Like I said, this one does have elements of maybe it might be a little racist. Which, I think Now, I think not everyone feels that way, but just the way he describes the looks of some of the characters in the story. See if I can. Like, it's a story about genetics and how this guy's fear of having certain kinds of genes from a certain part of his family, something like that. And so this one was a little questionable. It really showed the kind of person that Lovecraft was and his views. So I don't think some people might like the story, but I think some people might not like it, might take issue with that particular short story. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. And then, okay, so these next ones, I don't know how to say the titles. So we have Cellophase. I barely remember that one. And sometimes it happens. Sometimes some of my short stories I've read, I don't remember them that well to really be able to talk about them. And then Nyarlathotep. I think that one refers to Egyptian lore and how this guy fears this Egyptian god coming after him. And again, those are the two that I'm just like about them. Like I said, I barely remember that first one I mentioned. That I can't pronounce the title. I mean, of course I can't pronounce the title of either one of those. So that's all I read of this collection so far. And which those stories are shorter than the Stephen King short stories, so I was able to get through those quicker. Okay, so the next one is the library one, The Hacienda, by Isabella Canas. So this one is similar to Mexican Gothic, where it's kind of a Gothic story. You have our main character, and when she was a little girl, her father was killed for being a traitor to the government or to the people. And so as an adult, she and her mom are living with relatives who, because of who her father was and what he did, they treat them horribly. And wanting to make sure her and her mom had money and could leave this house and live on their own, she is forced to marry someone that she doesn't love. And he even has beliefs that her father did not have. He even has the very beliefs that got her father killed. Or like the beliefs of the people that killed her father. So her mom's not happy about it, but she realizes this is her only option. He's very wealthy and has status, so at least it means she'll have security for her and her mom. So when she gets there, the servants are not so sure about her. And his sister, who thinks that she should be inheriting the family fortune and not this new woman who's married her brother, starts to give our main character a hard time. At first, she seems to be accepting of her, but as the story progresses, you see she's not too keen on her and is trying to manipulate our main character, which this is kind of based loosely, vaguely based on Rebecca, except for our main character is not as passive as our main character Rebecca. But there is a previous wife, and it's like, did the husband kill her or not? And their relationship is also very formal, and he's not, like, they're very distant, but our main character also is, like, she knew she married this guy, not for love, but for financial reasons. And I just remember really being really good, and really creepy, and I think there was an actual ghost involved. And she does try at one point to exorcise the house with a priest who's also a witch, which I thought that was an interesting contrast. This guy is a priest, but he was a witch, and of course he has to hide behind his priesthood because they still burn witches. and so he can't let anyone know that he's also a witch, because I think the witches practice devil worship, or worship the devil, and he doesn't. He believes in the goodness of humanity and wants to help people. And there's a little bit of hint of romance between the two of them. So it's a very dark gothic story. I love the atmosphere the Canals creates in this world. I like our main character. I like how she's not passive and she's kind of feisty and tough and stand up for herself, but she also shows a vulnerable side. I like how it involves the politics of Mexican government at the time, which Mexican Gothic obviously included that as well. So like I said, unlike Mexican Gothic, it actually has a ghostly feel to the story. There are supernatural elements, while Mexican Gothic was more science fiction. And it was really good, and I like how it established that you can't really trust these characters. You don't know if they're on your side or not, or main character's side or not, I should say. I like that. I think that adds to the fear and the tension of the story when you don't know who to trust. And I think at one point she goes to like a witch doctor or something, or what's an equivalent to a witch doctor in Mexico, as well. Which I thought that was really cool to remind, it made me think of in the movie The Skeleton Key, when our main character, Kate Hudson's character, goes to the voodoo priestess or whatever, or I can't think of if that, or if it's hoodoo, or the hoodoo priestess. It's just between voodoo and hoodoo. I think hoodoo's the harmless one, the less harmful one, and voodoo's the one that like is kind of like devil worship. I think I'm not an expert, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, it was really good. I really liked the Hacienda. Okay, and then we have another one. So I finally read some other from the Edgar Allan Poe collection. So I read 3 from this one. The one I read was A Descent into the Maelstrom. It's kind of another ship story, kind of like MS in a Bottle, I think was, if I remember correctly. And our main character is sailing the ship, and it's a maelstrom, which is, if you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, I think a maelstrom is like, remember in the second or third, no, it was in the third movie when that big battle between Davy Jones's ship and the Black Pearl, in the British Navy, and Black Pearl and Davy Jones' ship by themselves in this big funnel. I think that's a maelstrom. And that's what's going on. They're in the middle of this big funnel and trying to sail out. That's basically all that happens. It was kind of exciting and thrilling stuff, but again, I have such mixed feelings about these stories. So far, I haven't been 100% satisfied with Poe's short stories. That's my issue with them. I'm sure at the time, if I read them when they first came out, if it was around back then maybe I would have liked them at that time, than reading them in this modern time. And plus, since I'm so used to novels. Now, with Stephen King, it's a little bit, there's more of a chance I might like his short stories better than these. I do, as always, love Edgar Allan Poe's writing. It's very, very enticing, very rich, and but I'm really excited, and I don't know if I'm just gonna wait until next year or start reading them now. I'm really excited about the next 3 or 4 stories in this collection. One of them is The Mask of the Red Death, which actually, that's one of the stories that the Edgar Allan Poe, that movie with John Cusack, where he plays Poe, And you have the police detective. I can't think of the actor's name. He played the Bard in the Hobbit movies, and he played Gaston in the live-action Beauty and the Beast. I cannot think of his name. The actor plays a police inspector, and all these people are being killed in the style that's inspired by Poe's work. So he gets involved. They call him to get into the police investigation because he knows his work better than anyone because it's his work. And he has to figure out what the killer's going to do next. And then his love interest ends up becoming a victim. Like she doesn't actually get killed, but she gets captured. So he and the girl's father get involved in the case as well. And the Mask of the Red Death is involved in her is part of what leads to her kidnapping. And but that one in the Cask of the Amontillado, I'm excited to read that. And then the Telltale Heart, and that now this is the short story. I haven't gotten to the poetry yet because let's see, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Black Cat. Okay, and then yeah, so actually 5. There's 5 stories in here that I'm excited. I don't know if I want to get to them yet or not, if I want to wait until next year or at least read one of them now. But now is in maybe the first week of November. But it's like I'm someone who likes to delay the gratification of something that I'm excited, because then once I read it, it's done and over with. That's something my dad kind of taught me that, because he when I was a kid, he always would tell my sister and I that don't rush Christmas, because once you rush it, once it's over, and you have to wait another year. So I'm always delaying the gratification of something that excites me. Like the favorite part of the meal, I wait until the last minute to eat. My Halloween, my favorite movie, when I do movie marathon that I'm most excited to watch, I save that for last. Like, the Halloween movies I love to watch every year since we moved here, I saved Night Before Christmas for later. I debate if I want to watch it now or wait until later, because it's one of my favorite Tim Burton films. Because I don't, it's like once I have consumed it, then it's over and I can't consume it. I can't consume it for the first time ever again. So I don't know if I'll read it. I don't know if I'll read one of those sooner rather than later. But, so let's talk about the ones I did read. So I read after The Mystery in the Maelstrom, I read Murders at the Rue Morgue, and its sequel, The Mystery of Marie Roget. And I thought they were okay. I'm just not big at reading detective stories. I'd rather watch detective stories than read them, because they can be kind of boring. I mean, it definitely has a really Sherlock Holmes feel. Now, I meant to look this up. I don't remember which one came first. If Poe's detective came first or Sherlock Holmes came first. But it has the same kind of feel that Sherlock Holmes has, where, like, you get the mystery, but there's not a lot of action, not a lot of actually solving the mystery. The characters are just talking about it. Because our detective is very similar to Sherlock Holmes, and he's really good at deduction and finer details. And they just kind of, him and his version of Watson kind of discuss it. But there's not a lot of action. I mean, at least in one of the stories, I think the first one, they actually go to the place where the body is, and where the murder happened. They actually physically go there. And also, that one was kind of interesting, how it turned out. How the mystery turned out. And there's a horror movie that recently came out, which is all I'm going to say, where it, a reviewer reviewing the movie brought it up and said it reminded her of the short story. And in the sequel was not, I was okay with the first one, but the sequel was just kind of blah. And I got really impatient, but I wanted to finish it. So I made sure to get through it quickly as I could. But I did take a break at one point and put the book down for a little while. But I'm glad I got both those read and out of the way. But yeah, I'm just not a big detective fan person. I prefer watching detective stories than actually reading them. I mean, I don't even like police procedural shows. But yeah, so there was that. Is that all of them? Yeah, those are so far all the ones I've read recently on the Poe stories. Okay, so after that was I finally did it. I finally finished The Historian by Liz Kostovo, and I actually bought one of her other books the other day at the roast office. And this one is the idea of what if Dracula had been a real person, like basically combining the myth of Dracula with the actual historical figure Dracul, because people did think that Bram Stoker was inspired by the actual bloodthirsty, prince of Transylvania, and there are elements that make you understand why they assume that. But in the author's note of the book, the horror book Dracul, which is the origin story of how Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, although it's historical fiction, it's not real. So, by J.D. Barker in Dagger Stoker, they basically fictionalized the actual story because Dracula had Bram Stoker believed that Dracula was real and that his book Dracula was kind of a warning to people, but his agent was like, we don't want to traumatize people, so let's not pass it off as real. So this is kind of taking that idea and expanding upon it. And our main character, she's the daughter of a historian. She also becomes a historian. We don't know her name though. I mean, we do sort of find out, but it's not really mentioned. The name isn't actually. I don't actually get the name. Her father is a historian, and she finds a book in her mom's. As far as she knows, her mom's dead, and her dad had been. She finds this book in her dad's library with a dragon on it, and she finds it very curious and is tempted to ask him about it, but instead, she asks him if she can go with him on his travels. Because she's homeschooled while he travels, and he is like, sure, and he kind of tells her about the world, but at the same time, she finally asks him about the book, and he tells her the story of how he came across it. And apparently he got it from his professor, who had found out this history about Dracula and that he might still be alive. So it's her father first. It's a story within a story because she is flashbacking to when her father told her the story and how they would travel to all these countries, and he explained things slowly because he didn't want to get it all out at once. He wanted to slowly explain it to her and tell her in his own way until eventually he leaves her, saying he's going to search for her mom. So apparently her mom's alive. And she decides to go find her father, even though he did not want her to. And this guy that she met that works at one of the libraries they visited comes along with her to find her dad and also continue trying to find Dracula in his grave. It's just, first, now if you are a vampire fan, it's debatable if you're going to like this because even though, yes, it's about Dracula's kind of more in the shadows, in the background. This presence that is looming in the background that he might show up, he might not. So there's not a lot of vampire activity. There are characters that were bitten, that are kind of a threat to our characters and chasing after them. And there's always that concern, but it doesn't have a lot of vampire action. It's more dark academia because our characters are doing all this research, which, as a nerd, as a lit nerd, as I call myself, they are there. I loved all the research scenes and going to all these different countries and trying all the different food and talking to all these people and learning about how all these different countries and how like places like Transylvania, Romania are so superstitious still, and just all that travel and stuff that I can't do that I would love to live. Like, I live vicariously through books like this because it's kind of hard to do that stuff because it's expensive to travel, and I don't know any foreign languages. I did attempt to take Spanish in middle school, but I was very bad at it. Um, and it's just and there is a little bit of romance in the story. Although the romance between the dad, her father, our main character's father, and mom, and our main character's mother is a little more like involved in the story. The other two romances aren't as, because there's three technically. They're not as, we get very little of them. Like, they kind of happen a little more quickly. And but it's really fun, and like I'm more focused on the academic part and the research. This kind of research I would love to do. This kind of stuff. I mean, although it is terrifying if tracking was real. I mean, imagine the possibility. I mean, I know people love vampires, and I do too, but considering what these vampires, if they're anything like how they're like blood sucking fiends, then that will seduce you and hypnotize you. Well, then, as cool as badass as they are, they might not be so cool, and you will end up being one of the undead. And it's like, do you really want that? You'll have to leave your family behind. You won't be able to. Food won't taste as good anymore, probably. You'll be a nighttime person instead of a daylight person. Yeah, it'd be kind of a sad life, I think. I mean, granted, if you're not alone and have a partner, then maybe you won't be so sad, but I just, like, as much as I love vampire stories, I don't know if I would ever want to be a vampire. Yes, super strength and speed and all that, and immortal, you're eternally good looking, but I still, despite all that, I still don't know. But yeah, so, like I said, if you're a vampire fan, you might like this, you might not, because it doesn't focus so much on the vampires. Although they're always in the background. And it is long, so, and I know a lot of people, not everybody loved this book. I mean, although I don't see what was wrong with it, I still liked it. And the criticisms it got, I didn't understand them. Sometimes I can understand criticisms. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. But in this case, I don't understand the criticisms. Especially, like, with the writing and stuff. People don't like the writing in this, and I don't get it. They say it's bad writing. And of course, there's a book that I love that I just read for October that they say is bad writing, and I don't get that either. But anyway, now the other criticism of that other book that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, I don't get why they didn't like the writing, but I get why they don't like other aspects of the plot of that particular book. So I get that, but I will talk about that book later. Okay, so we're on the last book I read. I was able to squeeze in. Oh wait, did I? Oh crap! I forgot one more book. So after I read The Raft, I forgot. I also read Darcy Coates' The Haunting of Ashburn House. So, which I noticed this is another who writes a lot about haunted houses. And this one was okay. It takes place, I think, in England. And we have our main character. I have to look at the back because I can't remember their names. Adrian is our main character. And she's just inherited this house from this aunt that she did not know. She had never met. And, so she comes to stay at this house, and she's really excited, but she hears a lot of rumors about her great aunt and the house and everything. So she's a little confused because, she doesn't know how her aunt could be a bad person at first. And there's a lot of weird stuff in the house. Like, there's things scratched into and engraved into the walls, like messages and stuff. And like I said, people are very wary of the house, and it's kind of off the beaten path. And, but she discovers there's something weird going on, something creepy, and it might be a ghost, it might not be a ghost that's haunting the house. And she's also, her aunt might not be who she seems. She just knows she's a bad person or not. And it's just really creepy and atmospheric. It's kind of fun, it's not like the best horror book I've ever read, but and I did get frustrated at one point with our main character, especially one of the messages that is engraved is, like, remember to light the candle. Constantly is engraved everywhere, and she just ignores it at first. But then as she figures it out, I would think that she would realize, okay, this might be important. Lighting the candle might help protect me. So it's like, and it's everywhere, so it's clearly relevant. And it's clearly important if she writes it all over the place. So it's like, I would think she would figure it out, maybe Adrian would figure it out, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's easy for me to say that as the reader. But anyway, I like our, I wish we had more time with that group of women who they're kind of remind me of like when in the 1950s you have that group of women that are just very close and like they have all these secrets. They're best friends, but they keep secrets from each other. That kind of group of women, and they're also very nosy. We have that in the story as well. We don't really get to spend a lot of time with them, but we get hints of them. And one of them does play a bigger role in the story. They are kind of the ones that kind of tell Adrian about the house and give her information and stuff. And I also like how it has like the situation where the internet's not that great and the reception is not that great either there. I actually was just in a situation where we were up in the mountains and we had that problem where we couldn't use our cell phones. It was so, the good news is we were together, the three of us. I was with my parents, so we weren't that much separated that much. But yeah, it made me think of, we just experienced that kind of situation. But, so it wasn't anything special, but it was still kind of fun. I wouldn't mind reading more of Darcy Coates, explore more of her work, although I think this might have been considered one of her worst to other people who read more of her work. But I kind of liked it, and I liked the little, like, there is a twist. I don't think it's a spoiler because I think you can expect a twist in a lot of books like this. There's going to be some kind of twist. So I don't think that's a spoiler to say that there's a twist. But yeah, it was pretty good. I didn't have any serious problem with the protagonist, with Adrian, except for that one part. Although another thing, but the twist does seem a little cliche. It does seem at least a little bit cliche. It's very fast-paced. Well, more like medium-paced, where it does seem slow at times. But yeah, I remember thinking it was good. I like the cat. She has a pet cat. I do like stories with characters that have pets. Like a cat or a dog. Because I always like both. I just can't have cats. My own cats because I have family members who are allergic. But yeah, so it was pretty good. Okay, so that was now we're finding the last book for September. So now we have Perfume. And I heard about this story from Emmy. I don't know because I just realized there is another Emma channel out there. She is someone I watch too. But I don't know what her channel name is. Like, is it Emmy Reads or something? I don't know, but she's the one who kind of introduced me to this book. Like, she talked about it. This one along with The Monk, which I've decided to donate that because I was going to try it, but then looking at reviews, I realized, am I really interested in that kind of thing? Because there's some stuff in there that I'm like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with reading. Even this one made me squeamish. So this is, which just kind of made me think of Holmes, H.H. Holmes, which for October I read Devil in the White City. So that's why I'm thinking about that serial killer. But this guy kind of reminded me of him. So we have our main character in Perfume by Patrick Susskind. We have our main character, Jean. Where's his name? Jean Baptiste Grenouille. He was born with the lack of smell. He does not smell himself, but he has this amazing sense of smell. He can smell everywhere and everything. His sense of smell is really powerful, but he doesn't have a body. He doesn't have body odor. And when he's born, his mom tries to kill him because she's a prostitute. She doesn't want any more babies. She keeps giving birth. Keeps getting pregnant, giving birth. And so this religious order takes the baby, and then these nuns take him and try to give him milk and stuff. And the priest but one of the nuns is not the nun that kind of takes him. She realizes because he doesn't have an odor, she's afraid of him. She thinks he's the devil's child. She even tells the father, and he's like, that's ridiculous. Which I had mixed feelings about that scene, actually, because on the one hand, I kind of agree with her that babies have a scent. I can't describe it at the moment, but I think little babies do have a scent. Because, I have, my sister has 3 kids, and I've held them and stuff, and they do have a scent. There's this baby smell, and I think my mom and my sister would agree, I think. I have to ask them. Sorry. So I kind of agree there, and I don't like the guy's attitude towards her. Like, he's very condescending towards her, and dismissive, and acts like she's just being a silly woman and being, But I also feel bad for the child at the time. Of course, when he grows up, becomes the adult human he is, I stop feeling sorry for him. I was a little creeped out by him. And, but at the same time, I can kind of understand where the priest is coming from. Because I did feel sorry for the baby at the time, and thinking it was unfair for her to abandon it, but I understand she's very afraid, and this is a very superstitious society. So, the priest takes the kid, and eventually I think he abandons the kid as well. So the kid grows up into this young man with this amazing sense of smell, even though he doesn't have an odor himself. And he ends up getting a job at this perfumer, and this guy who's very arrogant and learns to make perfumes, and he becomes obsessed with finding the perfect scent, to the point of he will commit murder to get that scent, because he has this great sense of smell. He thinks the only way to get that scent, to capture the perfect scent, is to kill a woman who has that smell. So he develops all these different kinds of scents, that, the smell of a woman, the smell to make him blend in more to society, the smell of innocence. He ends up really using those smells to control people, how people feel about him. And it's really creepy. And he becomes very obsessive and stalkerish and deserving. And there's at one point, which was really weird, where he kind of isolates himself because he's tired of people. He doesn't like people at all. So he, hides away in this cave and grows out his hair and everything. It's really disturbing. And people are so stupid because because of his power with sense of smell, which, again, he reminds me of Dr. H.H. Holmes in the way Eric Larson describes the kind of person Holmes was in Devil in the White City. Except for Holmes did not have a strong sense of smell. He was just disturbing, and it's so frustrating when the character is just so charming and has such power over people that you as the reader, knowing the truth, are like, you people are so dumb, and it's like, why are you trusting this person? Like, they're the bad guy. In fact, he gets away with a lot of shit, and it's just like, it just pisses me off, because this guy is just, that he's crazy, that there's something wrong with him, but you're also kind of fascinated by him. and will understand his power. And he's is just very, like, which I think that was the point. You want to have mixed feelings. You're disturbed, but at the same time, you're kind of intrigued by him. And a lot of people say that he was a genius. And I guess because he has this powerful sense of smell, he is really good at scents. And I don't know if that makes him a genius or not. I'm sure a lot of people will tell me it does. He's a genius. But I don't know. But yeah, it's very creepy. It's a good book to read this time of year. I probably will not read it again, though. I liked it. It's not that long of a read, but still, it's just, there were times when it made me very uncomfortable. And there was one point with animal cruelty that I had to skim through it and couldn't read it. But anyway, so yeah, that was the last book I read in September. So now we're on to October, which I didn't get as much read in October. In fact, I think the part of the problem is I read some really long books in October that I was trying to finish. So I did start this first book I read in October. I started in September, the last week of September, and that is the first book. Although actually, I did start because I decided to start over because it had been so long since I got it from the library. And that is Discovery of Witches, the first book in All Souls trilogy, which I'm glad the author did not call it a Discovery of Witches trilogy, although it won't prevent people from not calling it that. Because I think it's lazy when an author doesn't give the trilogy a name for the author and just names it after the first book, names the whole series or trilogy or after the first book, or in the duology. So this has been compared to Twilight because it has a similar romance to it. We have our main character, Diana Bishop. She's a witch, but she's a witch who refuses to practice her magic because she blames magic for her parents' death. She believes magic is dangerous, so she doesn't want to use it. She's afraid of it, although unconsciously she does use it, not realizing it. And she is studying at Oxford right now for her dissertation, and she's an adult, so she's not a student. Or she might be a student, I don't know, but she's not. She's in her 20s, and she comes in her major is history, history and science, like science and history or something, and so she comes across this mysterious manuscript which has some alchemy, hints of alchemy, and it seems like a manuscript on the manuscript, but she's trying this Ashmole 72, but she's trying to get away from magic, so she gets rid of it, ignoring it. But she gets the attention of all the other people that are of the different species in this world who want the manuscript, because they all know what the deal with the manuscript is. Diana doesn't. So she starts being hunted down by other witches, vampires, and what in this world calls daemons. They are magical creatures, magical people that look like, I think they're humanoids. They're humans, but they're very gifted and magical and genius. Artistic geniuses, I don't know. I still don't understand their deal. But she is being hunted down. And then one person, a biology professor, because she's in Oxford, I forgot to mention that it takes place in Oxford. The first part, anyway. One of the teachers one of the professors there is a biology professor named Matthew Claremont, and he's a vampire. And he discovers that she has the manuscript. And he finds himself drawn to her, but he also wants the manuscript, like everybody else. So he offers protection to her. At first she doesn't want it, but he won't leave her alone because he's trying to protect her. Which, yeah, I know that seems has some stalkerish tendencies. And there are some elements that remind me of Edward Cullen. And he does, but I also feel like a lot of that kind of stuff comes with the vampire territory. But I will elaborate more on that in a little bit. Let me finish describing the plot. So anyway, but she ends up starting to kind of like him, and they bond over yoga, and they slowly become friends, and then eventually they start to fall in love, but it's forbidden. So not only are these people after Diana because of the manuscript, but it turns out that they all know that she is having this relationship with Matthew. I mean, they're not even supposed to be friends. A witch and vampire cannot be friends. And so they come after them, and then he is forced to take her to stay with his mom, the woman that made him, and the woman that made her, I think, who are living in Paris, and she has to stay there with them, and they're not exactly. His mom is a little reluctant to welcome Diana into their family. So this is just really fun, and not very literary, not a lot of literary merits, but it's still really fun and thrilling. It kind of reminds me of the feeling I got with Twilight when I read it as a teenager. A very similar feeling, and it does, like I said, the plot is very similar. But I think that Diana has more of a personality than Bella and is more powerful, even though she's not using magic, and she's a lot more feisty than Bella, stands up for herself. And I think Matthew has a little bit more of a personality too than Edward Cullen. And I like how he likes to do yoga. And I definitely want to know more about the Damons and understand them. And I like all the side characters, like his friend, the Scottish guy. He tells it like it is and sets Matthew straight and like doesn't take his crap. And he's the first person that senses that Matthew's falling for Diana. I like his mom, and I like her aunts. I like a lot of things about it. I just have fun with it, you know? And I also, as a nerd, like I said, I like all the study and the research and learning about Matthew's past. One of the things I love about vampires is that vampires, especially if they were, depending on if they were made a long time ago, it's really cool because it allows you to get a lot of history, and they have experienced a lot of events in history. And there's a couple times where he reveals that he knows a lot of historical figures and tells Diane about them, and is like, oh, they're okay, or they're not that bad, or oh, they're kind of annoying. It kind of reminds me in the TV show Sleepy Hollow, where Ichabod Crane wakes up in the middle of the modern world because his wife put him under a spell, and he wakes up and he refers to knowing people like Ben Franklin, and he describes them and everything, which I kind of really like. And I think he also ended up liking John Adams. He did not like Ben Franklin, but he liked John Adams, I think. But yeah, I think it's so funny I think that's cool, and also kind of funny when characters that are from the past refer to other historical figures that they met. But yeah, this was really fun, and I like all the history stuff and the deep dives. And it's, again, another situation like the historian where it was like, I wanted to be part of the history. I wanted to study this kind of stuff. So I lived vicariously through the fictional characters. I would love to study this kind of stuff, even though it's not real, as far as we know. So I'm going to continue at some point. I just had a good time. It's not anything spectacular, but I had a good time, and it was fun. Okay, so that was now we're on to, I finished that in the first week of October, so after that I decided to finally start my reread, because I finally got all 4 books, because when I first got these books, I never bought the last book, Out of Oz, so, and then I ended up giving them to Larissa, when we were thinking about moving, and I don't know if she ever read them, but, I finally decided, then when we moved here, I decided I want to rebuy them, so I was thinking, I'll just buy mass market, but then I started to realize I prefer the regular size paperback, so I plan to rebuy them in this regular size paperback, so I finally got all 4 of them, and the good news is I have, like, the Roast Office had the last 2 books, so I bought those, and then it was like, okay, now I just need to buy the first 2 books. And, which first books definitely came in handy for that. So I bought So finally, now that I had them all, I finally was able to pick up and start reading the series. This is Wicked. And this is the one that when I was referring to when this was the other one I was referring to where some people did not like the writing style and said, you know, and I personally don't get it, but that's them. You know, they feel how they feel. So now there, even if you've seen the musical and you love the original stories by Frank L. Baum, there's no guarantee you'll love this book. Because, like I said, the musical takes the basic skeleton of the story. It takes the basic plot points. It does a more lighthearted version of them in the musical. It is a little less, doesn't elaborate as much. It's not as dark as the book is. So this, in case you don't know, by any chance, this is the story of the Wicked Witch of the West, whom is called Elphaba. She's the daughter of this rich nobleman who married a priest, Frex Spar. He preaches the word of the unnamed god, but while he's preaching and traveling all the time, she ends up having an affair with this traveling salesman who has this miracle elixir, and that's why Elphaba's skin is green. So Elphaba's her first daughter, and then she has an affair with another person from another place, and she has her second daughter, Nessa Rose, the Wicked Witch of the East, who becomes the Wicked Witch of the East. And she was born with no arms. And we get Elphaba's childhood, where she was, kind of people were scared of her. She had some sharp teeth, and and they thought something was wrong with her because of her green skin. And her mom ends up, her old nanny comes to stay with them to take care of Elphaba. So when Elphaba becomes a teenager, and she ends up going to Shiz University, a teenager young adult, where she meets Glinda, Bach, and Fiyero. Or she's called Galinda when we first meet her. And Glinda is a spoiled brat. She's very vain, and she's a rich girl, and she is very, cares all about sadness and stuff. But she and Elphaba eventually kind of become friends. They have a very complicated friendship. And then eventually Nessa comes to the school when she's old enough. And she and Elphaba also have a complicated relationship because Elphaba loves her sister. And she knows that it's her responsibility to take care of her, but there's a little bit of bitterness and resentment. She even tells Glinda that her sister is very spoiled and their dad's favorite. And there's a little bit of bitterness there. You can, so while Elphaba is at Shiz, she forms a bond with one of the teachers, Dr. Gillamont, who is a goat. So in this world, we have animals, regular animals, and then we have animals, which are animals start with a capital A, and they are animals that are human hybrids. So they think and communicate like humans, but they still have the physical features of animals, but they walk upright. And he becomes her favorite teacher, and she becomes kind of his I guess you could say TA. And she starts helping him do this research on animal rights, along with Bach, who is a Munchkinlander who has a crush on Glinda. And eventually he discovers something that he should not have figured out and gets murdered. And Elphaba thinks that her headmistress, Madame Warrible, was involved, along with the wizard, who is the leader of all of Oz. He's like the king and stuff. I mean, if you watched, Wizard of Oz, then you know. I guess you kind of know who he is. And she isn't, so as adults, after the murder happens, she and Glinda go to the Emerald City to meet him, and the meeting does not go the way she wanted it to go. And, so this is definitely, this is very dark and explores a lot of political aspects and social, a lot of political issues and a lot of religious issues, and there's a lot of adult content. It's a very mature story. Like, there's one point where their friends, Elphaba and Glinda don't go, but their friends go to this pleasure house, where it's basically you get drugged and I think have sex, and it's a very weird part of the story. And I know some of the reviewers that I like, some of the booktubers I like watching that made the review of this book that DNF'd is because they were not comfortable with that kind of stuff. There's cursing, and I do think they say the F bomb, and there is a love scene with Elphaba and Fiyero. He's the love interest, he's Elphaba's love interest. So there's some content there that's a little bit, well, not good for young teens, probably. And then we have Elphaba as a character is kind of unlikable. Like I can see where people might not like her as a character. She's kind of mean and very blunt, and a little too honest with people. She's not a very, but she also gets kind of obsessive and passionate. Like when she believes something, then she becomes obsessed with it and won't let it go. And depending if you think she's right or not is, how you feel about it. And it's, but she's also kind of, you kind of are entertained by her at the same time, like with her honesty. Like when she kind of mocks Buck and his crush on Glinda is, kind of amusing how she's just like, you're an idiot if you like her and you clearly are delusional. And like he clearly looks at her, Glinda, with rose-colored glasses. And then you have Nessa Rose, who's very self-righteous, even worse than her dad when it comes to religion. And actually, so we actually get the slippers in the story. Like I said, Elphaba knows that Nessa Rose, her sister, is the favorite in the family. They do have another brother, a sibling, a little brother who was the only one who was actually Frex's child. So it's funny that Nessa is the favorite, and Shell is actually his biological child. And Nessa gets the slippers, which in the original stories, the slippers are silver. The original Wizard of Oz. But in the movie, they were made ruby because when the movie came out, it's when Technicolor came out. So silver wouldn't show up in the Technicolor. So they made them red. And so they would stand out. So I really like what Gregory Maguire did, which was he talks about when he's talking about describing the slippers. Like one of the characters notices, either Nessa or Elphaba notices that in certain ankles they look silver, but in others they look red. So I thought that was kind of clever how that way you can include both, like the original color for them, but then the color in the version of the story that most people would know. But anyway, so it's really very intriguing. I remember the first time I read it, I was a little confused. Of course, I read it when I was kind of young, like pre-teen years, and I was still not used to these adult novels. So, I think it's good that I reread it, and it almost feels like I'm reading it for the first time because I barely remember the first time I read it. But yeah, it's very dark, and I think it's really good. I know not everybody's gonna love it, but I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed exploring the world. But I also like very dark fantasy. Like I'm getting into grim dark, but I've only read one grim dark. I read Joe Abercrombie's series, the one with the first blade, or the blade itself was the first book, and then I read the second one. I'm gonna read the third book before the end of the year. So that's the next one I read. Okay, so the next one, again, it was a library book, so I don't have anything to show you. So, and that's League of Gentlewomen Witches. I didn't even write the author's name. So, the League of Gentle Witches. I don't remember I think it's, what is her name? I cannot think of it. I thought I knew it, but I thought I hadn't remembered it, but I don't remember it. But anyway, so this is kind of, in the Regency period in England, I think. and it's kind of and so we have witches, pirates, and then there's another group of people, and there's a society of people, particularly women, that are introduced in the first book. So, by the way, this is the second book. I did not realize that this was the second book until after I brought it home. But I do think you can read it out of order without being. I mean, there are things that reference the first book, like little. You might get spoiled for things, probably. But I think I was still able to read it and understand the plot and get into it and really enjoy it, even though it's the second book and not the first one. So our main character, Charlotte, is a witch, and it is prophesized that she is the heir of Black Pearl, this famous witch, the witch who discovered their secret society, their league, and that that in her aunt, and so it is prophesized that she is her heir, and that there's an amulet of Black Pearls that she needs to receive to become the true heir. That it's her property. It's Charlotte's property. So Charlotte is sent when her aunt finds out that amulet has been stolen, that it's at the museum and might be stolen. She sends Charlotte to retrieve it before someone else does. Steal it before someone else does. And when she's stealing it, she comes across a pirate she'd already met earlier. This guy named Alex O'Reilly, an Irish pirate who wants to steal it just to steal it. And he, along with everybody else, shows up at the museum intending to take it. But she, but I'm trying to think. I think O'Reilly gets it first. Alex gets it first, and she chases after him. And she ends up reaching his house. And he and his, but just as they're about to get away, this other guy, Eames, grabs it, and I can't remember if he was a pirate, or I think he was a pirate, takes it himself, but then he gets kidnapped by another pirate. This woman that is very, she's a very frightened, even the other pirates are scared of her, and she's kind of insane. So Alex and Charlotte reluctantly work together to chase after this woman and save this guy, and get the amulet. And so it's an adventure, a race against time story. And turns out, and along the way, they find they're actually kind of attracted to her and attracted to each other. And they start getting a little too close. And they end up starting to fall for each other. But they both kind of have trust issues. And both they are supposed to be mortal enemies. And this was kind of fun. It was something fun to read, like Discovery Witches, but even more fluff. I like all the references to Jane Austen. Our main character is a big fan of Jane Austen, and she kind of struggles with things that Elizabeth Bennet struggles with, where she's trying to be fit into her society, but she's very different. And she's also drawn to this pirate who's attracted to him, but of course he would not be acceptable in her society as a suitable mate for herself. And sorry. And she's trying to be a proper lady, a proper Pennifer. I think that's the family name. Like, she's been taught by her aunt to act like a lady, to act like a proper young lady, and to be very civil and polite, and only steal, as a witch, and don't steal just for your own pleasure or something, or I don't know how it works. Because the witches do steal. They're kind of like Robin Hood type figures, I think. And which her aunt is an interesting character, but she's so judgmental and stuff. And she's so all high and mighty, but she's also kind of a hypocrite. And what happens to her at the end is really amusing and funny. Like the choice that she ends up making at the end of the story. She's just very a mixture of annoying but also kind of funny. And so not only is a commentary on that kind of society, but also it's kind of a commentary on prophecy and how these witches have this ability to make prophecies, but the prophecies are in their own favor. I'm like, you know, there's at one point where Alex and Charlotte are being captured. One of the witches tries to capture them and bring Charlotte home. And she says to Charlotte to convince her to come with her, she's like, I prophesied you would come with me anyway, so come on. Like, she's, well, I had a prophecy it was going to happen anyway, so you have to come. But then Charlotte does not go. She's like, Alex grabs her hand, and by that point they've fallen in love. They're just kind of in denial about it. He grabs her hand and is like, come on, and she goes with him willingly because she, and the woman is like, the witch is like, but I prophesied this. And she's so surprised, and it's funny because, and I recently watched this video, I cannot remember the channel name, but they are someone that talks about, like, they're another one of those booktubers that talks about another one of those YouTubers that talks about pop culture, particularly Doctor Who currently. And they just did a video on Doctor Who and how they don't really like the Chosen One prophecy, the Chosen One. And, they also, of course, talked about prophecies because Chosen One and prophecies kind of go hand in hand. And, they were saying how the reasons why they don't like the Chosen One in the prophecies because it doesn't give you much of a choice in the matter. And I feel like prophecies, you can say whatever you want. Like, prophecies are so vague and very confusing, and you can interpret that how you want. I mean, in House of the Dragon, they refer to the prophecy that is introduced in Game of Thrones by Melisandre, the prophecy of Song of Ice and Fire, and Jon, and how, and the prince that was promised. But then, in the House of the Dragon, Alicent misinterprets when Viserys is referring to prophecy while he's dying, so he's delirious, and he's can't have full on sentences, and he doesn't realize he's not talking to Rhaenyra, and he's giving he's saying, I do, and he refers to, and she misinterprets it, because the prophecy refers to Aegon being king, and their son is named Aegon, but there's 3 Aegons in their family. There's a lot of, it's a very common name, and it's like how in England, a lot of kings are, in England and France, they use the same names for kings and stuff, and it's the same idea. And so she is thinking that he's talking about his son, and because she misinterpreted. So the thing about prophecies is that they're vague. You don't know. You can interpret it however you want. And these women are interpreting these prophecies. They're making them up in their own favor and interpreting them how they want to. And it's just really funny. A funny and amusing commentary on the idea of prophecies. And this is just a really fun, fluffy fun. I like the romance. I don't sorry, I'm trying not to try not to do what I just did. But it's kind of hard because this tickle is still there. And it's just and I'm not a big romance person, but when I do read it, I do enjoy it. When I do read it, and sometimes I'm like, and it's really fun, and I like the idea of the flying house, and it's very cute and fluffy and stuff, and I like the commentary on this kind of society, and just they do include like the one bed trope, which I really like, and I like how throughout the story the couple is like, oh, we're still mortal enemies. They keep saying there's still mortal enemies throughout. Yeah, they're working together and they're allies, and there's clearly everyone sees that they're attracted to each other, and it's really funny how they keep saying, oh, we're mortal enemies, and it's just really fun and fluffy. Okay, so next is, so I had In the Shadow of Edgar Allan Poe, a collection of stories that are Poe-esque. Now I did return it to the library because I just had the last moment. I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and return it. I don't have to read all these stories if I don't feel like, and I can always recheck it out one day. And this collection, so I read some of them, and the first two I read were, I skipped ahead and read the two that I recognized the most, which are The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Gilman Perkins, and now this the other one I read, I did not know the story per se, but I recognized the author because I have another collection for books, which I might, that collection, the other collection I might have this particular story in it anyway. And that's Desiree's Baby by Kate Chopin. So first I read The Yellow Wallpaper. Again, Emmy, whose channel name, I'm not sure if that's what her channel name is, read this, loves The Yellow Wallpaper. And this is about a woman who, when her and her husband are staying at, her husband who's a doctor, are staying at their summer home, she is kind of what today we would call depressed, I think. And so her husband, who, like I said, again, he's a doctor, he decides to give her the infamous rest cure, which is the idea of keeping her in her room where she can't do anything. She's not allowed to write, read, or do anything like that. She's just supposed to lie in bed and sleep, which today people do, when you're sick or something. Like my parents told me to rest. But it's not like I can't do anything else if I don't want to. They're not gonna, but they just want, but it was more because I couldn't sleep the other night. So yeah, there are people that still do that, but I think you only do that if you actually don't sleep and you need to sleep, if you're genuinely sick, not just emotionally or mentally sick, but actually this kind of sick, like having a cold and you can't sleep. That's the only time when I think the rest cure should be applied. And then, but she can eat meals with him, but that's it. She can't do anything else. So she ends up in this room that's supposed to be a nursery with this ugly yellow wallpaper, and she becomes obsessed with it. She can't stop staring at it and thinking about it. And then she starts having hallucinations about it. And she tries to talk to her husband about it, but he dismisses it. And because he's a doctor, he thinks, oh, you look great, you look healthy, just continue resting and you'll get better before you know it. And her own brother agrees with him too. And she ends up not getting better. Kind of starts losing it. So the author, Charlotte Gilman Perkins, was actually inspired by something that she experienced, where she was told the same thing. And now she doesn't go as crazy as the main character does. Like, she doesn't lose her mind, but she does kind of start, losing. She does start to lose it a little bit, I think. I think maybe not. But she ends up talking to a friend who tells her, and helps her, and she realizes that she doesn't need to do that she just needs to get some fresh air and stuff like that, and go about her usual business. And so she started writing this short story, and people respond to it. Now, the doctor that prescribed that cure, she talks about how he responded. At first, he didn't really say anything, but then I think he was quoted as, changing. She told me he ended up changing his way of thinking, which I think not every man would do that. And this was really unsettling. Like, it's not creepy or horror kind of story. It's just more psychological. And the horrors of how, if you don't understand depression, the negative effects of what can happen when you try to figure out. You try and understand it, but you fail at it. Fail to understand depression and how to help someone with it. Like, it's not something that can be fixed, I don't think. I feel like it's something that just, you try to help the person in the best way you can. But, it's not something that's going to go away. I think I do know people that have experienced depression. Not that bad, but I know people have had feelings of depression, and like I said, it's a sad state, but I feel like I have complicated feelings about it. That's for sure. Um, but I think you got to be careful with it because you can't just dismiss it. Which that frustrating the way that her husband treated her and dismissed it because he was a doctor, so he knew what's best. It's like, yeah, doctors do know a lot more than someone who's not a doctor, but she understands her body and she understands how she feels. And clearly it wasn't helping her. But just because she looks healthy doesn't, like, I think he felt like he was talking down to her, talking to her like she was a child. And that's what she felt too. That's the vibe she felt. That he was talking to her like she was a child. And it was just very, it made me very angry. And I wanted to be like, jump into the story and be like, your wife is very sick and you're not helping her. You're making it worse. She is not a child. She just needs, keeping her isolated in this room without nothing to do is not going to help. And just like, and she even thinks that like, I think in a way he's at fault for her losing her mind and thinking that the wallpaper is dangerous. You know, I mean, and it's interesting to see how she goes from the wallpaper being just ugly and her not liking it to being like it has power over the people in her life. That's just so unsettling, and you feel so bad for her. And like I said, I wanted to jump in the story and actually help her on like what her husband was doing. And then the other one I jumped ahead to was Kate Chopin's Desiree's Baby. And I had a hard time writing my review for this, so I don't actually have a review on Goodreads. When it comes to stories like this, I get a little apprehensive because I don't want, I struggle with writing a review for this one. It's basically about this woman that she's half white, half black, I think, but she looks more white than black, which that reminds me of the Passage or Passing. No, it's called Passing. And recently, Tessa Thompson is in the movie adaptation, and I think she directs it too. I haven't watched it yet. I don't know where I can watch it, but and it's a book first. It's that, but and she ends up having her this rich guy meets her and thinks she's so beautiful, and they end up having a child together. But then the child comes out looking like, I think, black. And he's all of a sudden this white rich guy is like, oh no, you lied to me, how dare you, and cast her out because he sees her as lying to him and he's tricking him, and she didn't even know it. She was so distraught and upset because she thought she was white because she looked white, and she's very upset about this and feels abandoned, and that's basically what the story is about. And it's just very sad and heartbreaking story, and just really makes you very sad how things were at the time. I mean, and they still have a little. Unfortunately, they still have that in certain parts of the world, that racism, and there's still a little bit of that undertone, like, and it's a very sad story, and you hate the guy for it, and it's just, unfortunately, that's how it was back then, and it's not acceptable, and it's terrible. But it was good. As a story, it was a good story, and like I said, I think I have it in my collection of Kate Chopin works, the one with The Awakening, which I've not read yet. Okay, so after that one, I read The Sandman by E.T. Hoffman, and I have heard of that name before. I think he read the Sword in the Stone, I think, and Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. He wrote all that stuff. So this is a short story about this young man who recalls in his childhood when he was a little kid, and his mom would always tell him, you guys better get to bed before the Sandman gets you, and he always asked about it, but his mom dismissed it as, oh, it's just some silly thing we tell kids. We will tell you it's not real. But his nanny or whatever tells him, implies that it is, and really scares him. So one day he witnesses this man with his father, who he thinks is the Sandman, and torturing his father. And so it gives this impression, leaves this imprint on him. And the guy's an adult, is telling the story to people at a pub or whatever, telling at a bar or whatever, telling the story to them, recalling these memories. And he as he grows up, he's always worried about the Sandman showing up, and then he does come across someone who he thinks is the same guy but using a different name. And he becomes paranoid and absolutely afraid of this guy, and even is trying to tell his friend, the brother of his sister's, the brother of his fiance's, his fiance and his fiance's brother about it through letters and stuff, explaining what happened, how he's afraid, but she dismisses him, thinks he's crazy, and is worried for him and doesn't want to lose him to this monster in his head, in his imagination. And it kind of makes him angry and resent her, and kind of drives a wedge between them. And meanwhile, another person drives a wedge between this mysterious, beautiful woman of this neighbor, and he immediately falls for her, but the rest of the community doesn't. They don't understand, it. They don't understand her, and they don't like her. They think she's kind of unattractive and unappealing. They don't know why. Our main character starts to fall for her. So there's kind of two things that happen to our main character, and they are brought together by the end. And this was kind of interesting. It took me a while to get into it, but although it's not that long, but it was an interesting story. And the guy, I had such mixed feelings on the guy. I thought he was kind of an ass, but I kind of felt bad for him because he was so terrified, but his fiance kind of dismissed it, of his fears. It's like, on the one hand, I didn't know if to believe him, or where we set up to that it wasn't true and it was in his imagination. But I kind of thought he was an ass to her later on, but he was, but yeah, it was an intriguing story, kind of creepy and unsettling, but still really, so there's that one. Okay, then the other two I read were The Mummy's Foot and an account of some strange disturbances at Angier Street. Now, the author of that one, I think, is a well-known author and wrote some famous works. But so The Mummy's Foot is basically this guy buys the mummy's foot, the foot of a princess, and her ghost shows up wanting to reclaim her foot, and she decides to take him down to the world of her family's kingdom. It kind of made me think of the black toe, the big toe story and the scary stories, to tell in the dark, but a little more. But the way things work out is not as scary. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of silly and interesting. I don't have a lot to say about that one. And then an account of some strange disturbances on Angier Street. Kind of reminded me of the Fall of House of Usher, in a way, where these guys are staying at this house, and there was something wrong. The house, it is implied the house might be haunted, but they're not sure. And our main character is like trying to, he's having a really bad night and wants to leave the house, but he's also telling himself it's not real, it can't be real. So they try to debate if it's real or not. So they're trying to decide if they want to stay there or they want to leave the house. So it was really creepy and kind of, again, fun. And I don't have a lot to say. except for it reminded me of the fall of the House of Usher in a way. Okay, so then, oh, and I also read The Upper Berth. What is that one about? I'm trying to remember. The problem is that's a library book, so I don't have it anymore. I don't even remember what that was about. Yeah, I don't remember what that was about, so I can't really tell you what that one, how I felt about that one, because for some reason I can't think of what it's about. Maybe it will pop into my head after I film this. Once I'm done filming, I might remember it. But anyway, so after that one, oh wait, okay, so yeah, I read one more. So I read a bunch of a bunch of them. There was still 20 stories, so it's still not even half. I also read The Uncapturable Enemy, The Unconquerable Enemy. That one was kind of cool and so less horror, or it's a different kind of horror. It's basically, I think it's set in India, and this guy is telling us how the servant of the Maharaja, I think, or the Sultan, no, the Sultan, wants, he's very loyal, but then the Sultan kind of screws him over and cuts off either his hands or his feet. I can't remember. One of his body parts. So our main character, the servant, wants revenge, but every time he tries to get revenge, his plans are foiled, and he continues to lose more body parts. And then eventually, he's just this part, the head and the torso. And it was kind of fun seeing the way the guy tries to get revenge, and our main character observing the situation, trying to decide if he's for the Sultan or wants this guy to get his revenge. And it's, you gotta admire this guy's persistence and willingness to do whatever it takes, even without hands and legs, without the ability to feel or walk. He's just a torso, this whole middle part of his body. That's all he is. Which is kind of creepy seeing him trying to move around like that. And then the Wild Wild West kind of came to mind, where the bad guy in that movie is is kind of like that. He's lost his other body parts, so he's now this mechanical. I think he still has his arms, but he's in a mechanical wheelchair suit. It's his only way to function in the world. It kind of made me think of that a little bit. But I also watched a video where they talked about the Addams Family, and that was the same director did the Addams Family movies, the older one, the ones from the 90s. Also directed Wild Wild West and Men in Black. So they were talking about that movie a little bit and how it was not well received, but I kind of liked it. I thought it was fun. But anyway, so yeah, okay. So finally, that's all those short stories. So next, okay. So I decided, because I want to keep the memento in nonfiction, because nonfiction November is coming up in a couple days. So I wanted to read a nonfiction book so I would be motivated to read nonfiction. So I decided to pick up Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is the history of the World's Fair, but also the history of Dr. H.H. Holmes, who is a serial killer who murdered a lot of women, but not just women, a lot of families, and so this is in 1890s, and it was like, so it kind of compares. It's kind of a story with, could be two novels in one, and it's kind of, I can understand the people's criticisms, how there's no connection. Like people assume that Holmes would be kind of part of the fair in some way, that maybe he found a way to work on it or something. And I was thinking that maybe he would kill people at the fair. That he would go after them at the fair. So the only connection I could find in defense of the book and him writing these two stories together is that Holmes used the fair to his advantage. He used an excuse to build a hotel to keep his victims there, and he also used it as a distraction for one of his victims. And this woman and her sister, he got them tickets to the fair, and kind of used it to woo them and warm their hearts to him because our sister did not trust him at first. Um, and like I said, he used that as an excuse to keep to like relying on the people coming here from all over the world, and then people wanted to stay at the hotel so they'd be close to the famous White City. So, and it's also interesting how he's coming on these murders at the same time when this cool, exciting thing is happening that these people are trying to build this World's Fair, and it took a lot of time to build it. Like people were not like a lot of other cities wanted to do it. They didn't think Chicago could. Like New York wanted to host the World's Fair, and St. Louis even wanted to host it, but Chicago won, and obviously, and like it had the first Ferris wheel. It introduced shredded wheat. Trying to think of a lot of other like there were a lot of firsts here. Like it used the Edison's electricity here, and it didn't have some problems. Like it didn't not everything was ready by opening day, and there were some things that were culture stuff that was introduced at the World's Fair that today would be a little bit like might be offensive. Some of the things that they introduced, like one of the famous music that they use, like when they're talking about like belly dancers and someone luring the snake out with a flute. That I think is that music was introduced at the World's Fair. And a lot of these, like it's described such a beautiful city, and a lot of these people fell in love with it. So obviously, you spent more time at the fair than Holmes' story. So if you're looking for more about H.H. Holmes, like I said, he's not as involved with the fair as you would think, and there's not as many chapters on him, which maybe I think there's not a lot of information on Holmes, and so maybe Larson couldn't really do a whole book on Holmes. Which it's funny because he did write his own memoir. Holmes did, while he was in prison. But and my only knowledge of Holmes was that there was a supernatural where Holmes was one of the ghosts that they were hunting in the episode Supernatural. And that's the only time I ever heard of him. But so I was vaguely familiar, but I didn't know like what he did and stuff. The exact things that he did, but he's a very frustrating character because he's so charming, is charismatic, and he's described as very good looking. So he wins people over and seduces them, and like he uses charms to get out of a lot of debts. And he played the sympathy card, and just as the reader, I want to be like, you idiots! He is manipulating you. He is a serial killer. He is a bad guy. But no, I think if I were in the position, maybe I would fall for it too. I probably would fall for it too. But as the reader, of course, I'm just pissed off that they're dumb enough to fall for it, to fall for his charms. But he's so charismatic and friendly, and he knows how to woo women and seduce them and gain their affections. And he's really clever. He actually builds his own empire because he buys like all these businesses and drugstore, and then like I said, he creates this hotel. And when they get to the part where he describes what he wants for the hotel, what he intended, and then eventually when the police are investigating, they finally realize things about Holmes, the way they describe how the hotel was set up was really creepy and disturbing. And just there were so many things he was doing that people were, I think, sort of suspicious, but they didn't entirely question it because they were thinking, oh, maybe we're just imagining things. I'm just being paranoid. And everybody just is charmed by him, and it's just, like I said, very frustrating all the stuff he gets away, not just murdering people, but conning people out, and getting himself out of having to pay his debts. But yeah, so it's interesting to see this going on the same time the World's Fair is going on, which was having financial problems. Daniel Burnham, the guy, the father of the World's Fair, was not easy to work for. A lot of the people that were building it were, at that point in age, they were all getting a lot of illnesses and dying, and so it's just an interesting take on all this, and I actually like the World Fair stuff. I know it's probably not for everybody, because this is a very polarizing book, and I know people are kind of annoyed by and don't understand the connection between Holmes and the World's Fair, and why he put them together in the same story. Like, you gotta read them as separate books, and like I said, I get that if you don't like, if you're not like a fan of all the, stuff talking about the World's Fair and all that, then you might not like this book. But I liked it. I enjoyed all that stuff, and I also enjoyed how we, kind of got teased about Holmes throughout, but we don't get the full story in one go. We just keep going back and forth, because it made me more intrigued and wanting, and would get more exciting when we got to that stuff. So yeah, I liked it. But I understand not everybody does. But I thought it was good. And I don't know if I want to read his other book. I'll have to check it out and see if it's something that interests me. Because like I said, it's not just, it's, when it comes to nonfiction, I think it's all about the topic for people. So the last thing I finished, and then I'll mention what I'm going to read next, is What Moves the Dead, which is a retelling of The Fall House Usher. Which, again, I was kind of disappointed with that one. I think that one, like, went over my head or whatever. It felt very incomplete, and I was very unsatisfied with it, of that one. But what T. Kingfisher does is expands on that story. She takes some of the things that were hinted at, like, I guess in the story, there's talk of fungus and stuff. I don't remember, and I need to reread it. So she expands upon it and uses that as the thing that causes the siblings to become ill. I think, and which I just realized that might kind of spoil things for you guys. But it's really creepy. I like how T. Kingfisher describes the bodily movements when the characters are ill, including the hairs, which are very different from rabbits. They're bigger. I thought the main character was okay. I liked him, and I was interested how he was like obsessed with finding the logical explanation. Like, he would always say, like, there's one point where he shoots the creepy hare that has been infected, and he gets up and walks away, but he thinks, oh, I must have missed it. Like, he tries to rationalize all this until he can't rationalize it anymore. Then he has no excuse but to accept it. And it does. I think it probably helps him that there's a scientific explanation for the situation that's happening to his friends. So I have not told you what this is about, other than it's a retelling. So our main character, Alex Easton, he's non-binary, by the way, which I feel really dumb for not realizing that. But I still don't understand what non-binary means. I need to look it up. But I think he is non-binary. I think I read a review that said he was, and I think there were at least two things in there that I must have missed, that it turns out, when I'm thinking back, that I think they were what references to him being non-binary. But like I said, I need to look it up just to check, see if I'm understanding correctly. And he receives a letter from Madeline Usher, who's the sister of his friend and fellow soldier in the war, and I don't know which war. And it turns out she is terribly ill and thinks she is dying. So he rushes to go visit her. He's in the English countryside, and it turns out that Roderick, the brother, did not know that she wrote to him and is completely surprised by it. And so, and this American doctor is also there. This guy named Denton, Dr. Denton, I don't remember his first name, is there. And one of the only thing that bugged me about our main character Alex is they were very opinionated and judgmental about Americans. And as an American reader, that kind of irked me a little bit. I mean, I understand our like sometimes the behavior of Americans, but as an American, I feel like I have to defend our nation, our people, and be like, okay, we're not that bad, we're not that annoying. Like, I mean, I don't know how much this character has interacted with Americans, but I understand like the faux pas that Denon might have done wrong. I get that. I understand his annoyance, but at the same time, I'm a little okay. Calm down, chill out. I mean, don't judge him just because he's an American. I don't like it when when characters are like that. I mean, I'm fine with that being a trait for a character, but including that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we get it. You don't like you don't like this about this group of people, and so, but they do eventually become friends, or at least allies, in this trying to figure out what's going on. And so, with help from a mycologist, this woman, Miss Potter, who studies funguses, like mushrooms and stuff, they find that there might be a fungus involved. And so, it's really creepy. It kind of reminds me of Mexican Gothic, which, funnily enough, after I finished reading it, I read the author's note, and she compares this to Mexican Gothic and says that she admitted that she felt like Sylvia Moreno Garcia did it better in her book. But I think this was pretty good. I liked this. It was a little short, and the writing there were times when it felt kind of awkward. Like when he would refer back to things from the past. Like it was a little drying at first, it felt a little random at first. But I got used to it after a while. And our main character almost felt a little too modern for my taste. In his response, in the way he spoke and stuff. Or the way he thought. And, but yeah, it's very, again, another author does really great descriptions that are creepy and grotesque. And I like how she describes the movements, the body movements of people, like the hairs and Madeline, and it was really creepy. And the thing that ends up being the force that's infected them almost has a human has that instinct to survive that is you almost feel bad for it. And it doesn't see himself as a bad guy, as like a lot of like I feel like you have two types of villains where it's quite clear that they are bad guys, and then there's that antagonist that's not as villainous as it appears, but it wants to do something that humans wouldn't like. But at the same time, you almost feel bad for it. So like I said, it was very interesting, and like I said, I like how it expanded on the story, the House of Usher, and I think maybe I will reread Farmhouse Usher and maybe see if I can appreciate it a little bit more. But anyway, I really enjoyed this. And I'm glad that I'm doing this wrap up when I can actually show you a physical copy of the book. The one library book that I can show you. But anyway, I like this cover. I think I like the cool design of the mushrooms and stuff. And mushrooms have always creeped me out, even before I read something like this. And we get a lot of mushrooms in our yard, and I had to use gloves the other day to pick them out. But yeah, so. But anyway, so yeah, this is really good. kind of short though. So anyway, that is what I read in October and September. So I'm currently reading Joe Hill because I wanted to attempt another Joe Hill book. Because I did like Nosferatu, and I thought about giving heart-shaped boxes another shot, but I decided to get this one instead. So far this is about a guy named Iggy, and his love of his life had died a few years ago, and he still has not gotten over it, and he has been framed for it in the scene as he might have killed her. And his parents, his rich, famous parents, try to protect him from that. And so he's been seeing this one woman, Glenna, and they got their own place together. And so one morning he wakes up and he has these horns on his head, and he doesn't know if they're real or imaginary. And he's talking to Glenna and seeing if she can see them, but instead she does something really weird. Instead of seeing, she barely notices the horns, and instead tells him how she really wants another donut, even though she's not hungry. And she asks him, "Can I have another donut? I mean, I just really want to stuff my face and put my face in this box and eat all these donuts." And this woman, he describes her as being fat, and a little fat, and just he doesn't think she's all that pretty. So right away, this guy's not that great of a guy. He's kind of an ass. I mean, you feel sorry for him, but at the same time, he's kind of a jerk. And so he's like, "I don't care, go ahead." He kind of ignores him, but the way she stuffs her face grosses him out and stuff. And so he leaves, and he's like, okay, I need to go to the doctor and figure out what's wrong, seeing if anyone can see these horns. And so he gets to the doctor's, and right away when he gets there, there's a mother with a little kid, a little bratty little daughter who's fighting her mom, and like aggressively attacking her, fighting her and stuff. And the mom and the nurse, the secretary, the receptionist is like, she sees Iggy and is like, "I just really want to tell that mom to shut her little brat up and just tell her to be quiet and everything." And she asks Iggy, and she says, "Can I do that?" Asking him, and he's, at first he's like, "Oh, that's weird." Glenna did the same thing, and he ends up, and then he goes to sit back down. The mom says, "I just cannot steal my child. I didn't want to be a mother anymore. I shouldn't have had a kid." And do you think it'll be all right if I smack my child or whatever? And so he puts it together that having these horns, he has this strange power that he can, which I still haven't figured out what, if people think he's the devil or something, or he's like a demon, and he brings out people's more negative traits. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, but I've only read the first 5 chapters. I mean, I attempted to read chapter 5, but I was just coughing so much last night that I had to stop. And even when he goes to the receptionist, she's like, ask him if she can, ask him again if she can tell off the mother, and then deciding to test his theory and think, "Oh, I must have some kind of power." He's like, "Well, go ahead." So she does, cusses her out and stuff. And the mom was like, "Excuse me," and, bites back, and they start fighting. Even the little girl says something to him. She's like, "I hate my mommy. Can I set her bed on fire?" or something like that. And it's very disturbing already. And it's just, so it's very interesting. And I'm trying to figure out what the deal with this guy is. Like, has he temporarily become the devil or something? I don't know. Or, like, does he have demonic powers? I don't know. I'm curious. So I'm gonna keep going. Might read some today, although I just realized it's almost 4 o'clock. It's like, almost at the 20-minute mark for 20 minutes to 4. So, I better go. And I will talk to you later. I hope you guys like this video and you can understand me. And if you did, please give this a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification below if you want to be notified when I post new videos. And I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.